How's it going, everybody? It's Pilot Flame, and we are back with another FPL video, and today we're going to be looking at PEP Roulette for Game Week 5. This is where we take Pep's previous lineup from Game Week 4, and then we go and try to predict what type of wacky formation and lineup he could potentially put out this game week. If you haven't done so already, make sure to leave a like on the video. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you're new around here. It greatly helps out the channel, and we are thankful for the 1,100 plus subscribers that we already do have. Also, turn those notification bells on so that you can get the content as soon as it is readily available. And drop us a follow over on Twitter and Twitch. It's PilotFlame226 on those platforms. Twitter, we post our weekly bulletin of videos and streams as to when they will be going out on which days throughout the week. And we do our weekly streams over on Twitch. PilotFlame226 on that as well. As mentioned, we do the preview streams on Monday at 7 p.m. EDT, and the deadline streams 1 hour before the deadline for the FPL game week. However, for game week 6 and 7, based on the times, I'm going to be doing it the night before because I can't do it on the Friday afternoon because I won't be home at that time. So we'll be doing it the night before on the Thursday at the same time as we do the preview shows, 7 p.m. EDT. So without further ado, let's get into the video. So this is the team sheet that Pep chose for Game Week 4 in their 1-1 draw versus Leeds United. He went with a pretty standard back four. I figured if he had Ruben Diaz fit and readily available, he would play him, which he did. He played him alongside Laporte, and I think that's going to be his #1 pairing at center back. Played with Walker at right back, Mendy at left back, both of which didn't have the greatest of games, Mendy especially after being substituted. He went with De Bruyne and Foden in a midfield 3 with Rodri, and then played Ferran Torres out on the right. Mars is kind of a false 9, and Sterling out on the left, and we saw a lot more output from the likes of Sterling. Foden was doing a lot of intricate passes, getting himself forward, sometimes playing as like a shadow striker. I like him in that role. It suits him very well. I just think that it would have been better off putting potentially like Delap or somebody like that, or even Ferran Torres as the false 9, because Mars was a bit, kind of, underwhelmed and didn't really, know what to do in that role, as do most of the City, attackers. I would have probably much rather seen De Bruyne potentially play there because he actually knows how to play there, or even Foden. I think he's good enough to play that role. It's a very similar-ish style of play as to playing in a midfield 3, in that you want to kind of drop off, facilitate the play, have passes in and around the corner. The only thing that you have to be more accustomed to is kind of having your back to goal sometimes when receiving the ball. Some players that of worthy note that started on the bench: so Fernandinho only came on very late in the game. Nathan Ake came on for Mendy at left back, which was quite interesting. So I think he might have a chance at starting in at left back this coming game week, as Mendy was way out of position for a lot of the attacks that Leeds had, and it was a very open game back and forth. And I just think every time they play with Rodri as kind of like the shielding presence in front of the back four, it just leaves them so vulnerable. And I hope that Pep goes back to putting Fernandinho in that role. We know Fernandinho is getting up in age. I think he's 35 or thereabouts. He's definitely in his mid-30s or close to it, and he can't play game in, game out. They do have a Champions League fixture next week, which will be against Porto. It is at home, so they don't have to travel. They play home versus Arsenal and then home versus Porto, so no real traveling there. De Bruyne also with some fitness issues potentially, but we'll get onto that in just a second. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of team Pep puts out. But let's kind of talk about some of the players that we need to keep an eye on in his press conference, see if he mentions them this game week. So the first player that we're kind of taking a look at here is Kevin De Bruyne. He's had 3 90-minute games in the Premier League since the restart, getting a nice haul in Game Week 2, and then blanking with no clean sheet points in the next 2 games with Arsenal at home to come. I think he's a very good option for the captaincy if he does start. However, there is some injury concern for Kevin De Bruyne. He was taken out prematurely in the Belgian international games, and it came up from Roberto Martinez that it was just, precautionary. It wasn't anything serious. So we'll have to see if it's more of an actual, injury. Some are saying it's a muscle injury of some kind that's been potentially plaguing him because he hasn't had that much of a break off. But I think it's more of a fatigue setting. I think they'll definitely want to play him, or Pep would at least want to play him in the big game versus Arsenal, because Porto, you know, as much as it is a Champions League game, they should win that pretty comfortably with their B side. Really, it is a home game, and they should win that one quite comfortably. And I think they can, you know, rest De Bruyne in that, so he gets a full week off, and then they prepare for their Premier League game the following weekend. And I think that preserving De Bruyne in certain games is going to be quite crucial. You know, Porto is going to be the type of team, they're going to come there. They're going to have something to prove. They're going to want to be, you know, kind of in Manchester City's face, and that's the type of game where potentially you don't want to risk his injury or his fatigue to where he doesn't play too well. Maybe he's, you know, sloppy on the ball, and then potentially gets injured or overexerts himself too much. And I think the Premier League is Pep's main target. They want to definitely reform themselves because they lost to Leicester. They've drawn with Leeds in their last 2 games, and then they beat Wolves in game week 2. So they're going to have to potentially kind of pick some things up. Only 4 points is, you know, not the greatest start for Pep's Manchester City. So I think definitely De Bruyne will play in this coming game week. I think he's kind of important to how they play, and especially versus teams like Arsenal, who are going to play a back 3. De Bruyne has come out and said himself that he plays more in the 10 role, which will mean that he's going to play a crucial part. And if they go 2-3-0 ahead, don't be surprised if De Bruyne gets hooked early. The next player I want to talk about is Raheem Sterling. He's managed to pick up a couple of turns in the 3 games that he's played thus far, getting an assist in the first game week and getting a goal and some bonus points for himself in the last game week versus Leeds, getting the opening goal in that fixture. And he definitely plays a lot better off the left. The one game that he didn't play too well in was against Leicester, and where did he play? He played in the false 9 role. And the other 2 games which he's got a return in, he's played on the left wing, which I think suits him a lot better. It's his style of position. He's allowed to cut in, he's allowed to shoot off the left hand side, he's allowed to make those darting runs in behind at an angle, and I think the false 9 role doesn't suit him as well, even though he has been deployed there, but to not that much success. I think he's going to be crucial versus Arsenal to get in behind their back 3. I think his movement is going to cause problems for them, and I think if he's on form, he could definitely do some damage, especially if De Bruyne is playing in that number 10 role, and I think that he should be a great asset going forward. He is 0.1 cheaper than De Bruyne at the moment, and I think when he's deployed on the left wing is very good for Raheem Sterling, and with Jesus and Aguero potentially coming back in the not too distant future, I think we could still see the best out of Sterling in the game weeks to come. So if you have him, I think he's definitely going to start this week. I see no reason why he shouldn't. It's a big game. He starts in pretty much all the big games, and I think that Sterling could do quite well and is an outside shout for the captaincy this game week. Now, the last player that I wanted to talk about is Sergio Aguero. Now, you're probably thinking, Pilot, he's not back yet. He's just been in training, that sort of stuff. But it's just the nostalgia factor that we know that Aguero could potentially be coming back. Jesus is another one that could also potentially be back. We're still not sure as to which one of them will be back first. However, we've seen pictures of Aguero in training, and he's apparently trained all week. And I think that if he gets 30 minutes this weekend versus Arsenal, or even if he starts versus Arsenal and does well, and maybe he plays 60 minutes and gets soaked off, but he's, comes out unscathed, I think a lot of people are going to be looking at him fantasy-wise. He's currently 10.4 million, which is lower than what he has been his entire, since he's been in existence, basically, in FPL and doing well, basically. And I think that Arsenal is a team that he could definitely score against. They have shown, vulnerabilities to him specifically in the past, just stylistically. And I think it's just fantastic that City can get a player of his caliber back into their team, because we know how deadly he is. The interesting caveat with him is that I'm curious to see if he is still going to be on penalties. We know that De Bruyne, since Aguero has been out, has kind of stepped up to the helm and taken that rite of passage from Aguero since he's been out, because Jesus and Gundogan and these sorts of players haven't really been successful from the penalty spot. De Bruyne has kind of come in. We know his set piece is good, and obviously he's very good at shooting, so it just made sense to put him on penalties. If De Bruyne still keeps it, then you can kind of say, okay, Aguero's 1 million cheaper, but he is a forward, he gets less points, all these sorts of things, but he's going to be more around the goal. He is a rotation risk with Jesus when they're both fit. However, we do know the golden rule with these sorts of players, specifically Aguero and Jesus for Man City. If one of them is injured, you get the other one. So I can definitely see myself bringing in Aguero if he's back, fit, and available and looks sharp. But again, he was out with a long-term injury, so we'll kind of have to see how he beds in. I don't expect him to be in the squad at all this week. If there's any inkling in the press conference that, you know, Pep says that he's back, or he'll be involved, as Lampard's favorite term is for Chelsea, as he was talking about Hakim Ziyech, I think that it'd be quite intriguing for some people to think that maybe he might get a start from the beginning. But Pep's a bit ambiguous with the things that he says in press conferences. But I think that when Aguero comes back in the team, or when Jesus comes back in the team, they're going to be a much more transformed team. And I just like the prospect of bringing in an old favorite back into the FPL lineup. So this is my predicted lineup for Pep's Roulette for Game Week 5. I've gone with pretty much the same down the back, except I think that Pep is going to play Nathan Ake in at left back, as I think he's a bit more stable and suits the Premier League. You know, if Walker's bombing forward, he can have a bit more security down that left-hand side, as Mendy was a lot more exposed on that flank. I think that especially if they go with the likes of Willian or Pepe, he'll be definitely aware of that. He knows that Walker has the pace to keep up with Aubameyang, and with Diaz now on that right-hand side instead of the likes of Garcia, they should be able to hang on to Aubameyang and keep him under wraps. And I think that Mendy's a bit more suited more in the likes of the European competitions, just because they don't have that high intensity unless you're against the elite top-level teams like Bayern Munich, like PSG, these sorts of teams. But they're playing against Porto, who, no offense to them, but they're not that elite level European competition in terms of what you would expect in the latter stages of the Champions League to be facing. In midfield, I've gone with a different approach here. I've gone with Fernandinho at the base of midfield. It just suits him better, and I think he'll basically be rotating with Rodri, one game a week. I think you can probably get away with playing Rodri in midweek versus Porto, and then Fernandinho in the Premier League games. Gone with De Bruyne. He should be fit and available. It's just a little bit of fatigue. Pep will want to play pretty much his best team as he can, and De Bruyne is definitely a part of that. Phil Foden in there did fantastically well in that midfield three, and I think he goes the same with the front three as well. So only 2 changes in the whole squad, with Ake coming in at left back and Fernandinho coming in at the center defensive midfield position, which would leave the likes of Rodrigo or Rodri, Bernardo Silva, and Mendy on the bench. I think that if De Bruyne is feeling a bit fatigued, he may start on the bench, and you might see the likes of Bernardo Silva fit into that midfield 3. Or Pep might go with Foden in the 10 role and then play Rodri in a base of a double pivot in midfield and go a bit more defensive. It's something that, De Bruyne said that he would play in the 10 role against the teams that play a back 3. So it is possible that maybe Torres or Foden get dropped for this game and both Rodri and Fernandinho play versus Arsenal. But we'll have to see. This is my predicted lineup. Hopefully I can get it right and be a bit more consistent, because the lineup was a little bit off last week and we want to get it exactly right every week, because that's the point of the series. And that's going to do it for my predicted lineup and this week's edition of Pep Roulette. Make sure to leave a like on the video if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to the channel if you are new around here. It greatly helps out the channel significantly. And leave a comment down below as to if you think my lineup is going to be correct, or if you have a different version of the Manchester City lineup that you think Pep's going to run with this week. And turn those notification bells on so that you can get the other videos on the channel out as soon as they are readily available. Also, as mentioned previously at the start of the video, Twitter and Twitch, PilotFlame226, give those a follow. I'm also going to get some emotes over on Twitch done up as well, because we are now an affiliate, so we'll have a tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 emote, so be sure to look out for those, as you can now sub to the channel. So it's not required, but it is definitely appreciated. And Twitter will be posting our usual content on Sundays as to what is coming up throughout the week, as any other updates that may be applying to the channel. And we'll be doing our deadline stream on Saturday at 5 a.m. EDT as per usual. Thanks for watching, and until the next one, take care.